If your customer's paying cash, watch this now.
How do you defend yourself in a state sales tax audit? Well, this is tricky, folks, but I'm going to give you a rundown of what happens. Okay, I'm Anton with Tax Law Offices. Let's just jump right into it. You receive the letter from your state. They have a sales tax, and let's say that you are on a restaurant or some service business, especially if you deal with a lot of cash. Oh, that cash. What cash? That cash. Folks, the state is going to, they're going to collect a lot of documents from you. They're also going to talk to you. They're going to ask statements. They're leading you to say something that's not true. Because the reason why you're audited is the state has already done some initial assessment of how much business you've actually done versus how much you reported. And one of the ways that they're able to do that is either that you haven't filed your state tax returns or you filed a federal tax return that doesn't really match the state sales tax return. So they already have information and they're leading you on making a false statement. So now we're going to stop right here. I'm going to tell you, if this kind of describes your business to where maybe you had cash and didn't report all of your cash, before you say another word, a single word to that state tax auditor, and if you already have, then stop what you're doing right now. And folks, get a lawyer. Get a lawyer. You can afford it. The business can afford a lawyer, but get yourself a lawyer because, like I said, you're being led into make false statements, making false statements to the government about tax. Well, that's kind of a crime. So don't let yourself get trapped. So anyway, we'll go more into the process, but like I said, get a lawyer, be smart. You're a smart business owner. Okay, so they will gather that information. If you have representation, they'll go back and forth and they'll argue about legal issues, whether something really has to be taxable or not. And either they agree, we do a lot of agreements when we think we have a really good result. But sometimes the auditor just goes out on some kind of wild tangent or wild hare or wild goose chase or something wild. And they'll create an audit report that you just cannot agree with. Well, there's an opportunity for appeal. Every state that has a sales tax, every state that has audits, they have an appeal process, every single one of them. Okay, so if it makes sense to do the appeal, then do that. And then at that point, if you can't reach an agreement with appeals, well, there is still a higher level at most states. At most states, and you can take advantage of that. Now, look, once the audit is over though, what is going to happen, especially if it's a sales tax audit, and especially if you had some unreported income because of that cash, well, then the state will now audit your business tax return, your business income tax return. If it has one, it's going to audit that because it's going to have determined that you had more income than you reported. More income now from the audit. It's going to look at that. And if you have one of those companies like an S corporation, a partnership, even a sole proprietor, if you have something like that, an LLC, then after that, they're going to audit your personal tax return because they determined that the business had more income and therefore personally you also have more income. It's a lot to it. It's a lot of steps, a lot of opportunity for you to really mess up. So don't mess up. If you find yourself in one of those situations before you dig the hole even deeper, folks, stop. It makes sense to stop. It makes sense, and it makes economic sense too. Hire the right help. Okay, folks, protect yourself and hire the right help. It makes a lot of sense and saves a lot of dollars, but also keeps you out of trouble, keeps you from making false statements to the government about your taxes. That's called tax fraud. Don't do that. Don't do that. Okay, folks, look, I'm Anton with Tax Law Offices. You want to learn a little bit more about dealing with collection and sales tax? I'll tell you what, I got a link to that video here. And folks, be smart, be smart. Okay, take care.